Well, hello and welcome everyone to the second session on the 4X week. My name is Corey Davison. I am the co-founder and CEO of 4Experience. We are a research company that helps companies undergoing tremendous growth in using research to align people, data, and systems in order to deliver cohesive experiences and improve the customer experience, as well as business outcomes, of course. So, welcome here. I wanted to introduce you a little bit about what we're doing this week. This is part of the series that we're conducting every day during this week in April. So, join us tomorrow as well, if you're joining here live as well, but join us every day at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. That's 4 p.m. Eastern Time for those on the East Coast. And this is part of the 4X week is a little treat that we bring to you for those experts or those professionals who are either in a marketing role, in an employee experience role, a customer experience, or if you are in user experience. This is your tribe. And if you want to learn more about how to join this exclusive tribe and have more access to other individuals like yourself who are driving change in your organization to make it more human-centric, check us out at 4experience.com/roundtable. So I'm just sharing it here with you. So 4experience.com/roundtable. And I have today the pleasure of introducing our next panelist. Our panelist for today is Natalie Ilkiw. And we're going to be talking about employee experience from a change management perspective. Let me share a little bit about Natalie. So Natalie is a change advisor at a reputable Canadian airline based out of Calgary. And her role is really, she specializes in building strategies to connect leaders and employees and helping them effectively navigate and adopt change. And of course, we all empathize with the airline industry and how change has been so dramatically impacting over the last year. So welcome, Natalie. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
That's wonderful to have you here with me and joining this conversation. So for those who are joining, we encourage you to comment, to tell us what to be kind and courteous, of course, but be also curious and ask questions. I also want to share that Natalie is going to share with us today tips and strategies on how to bring people along with the change, right? So how to bring people when there's change happening, of course, is never easy. And her opinions and her expertise are hers, and it's not necessarily reflective of those of the organization that she works with, of course. But we're looking to that when you come out of this session, that you will have learned, new tips and strategies to bring people along with the change as change is being implemented as well. Part of the challenge is what we're going to be talking about here today. So Natalie, if you can please share a little bit about yourself, how you got into change management, and a little bit about your current role as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, so change has always been something I'm interested in, and it started back when I was working in healthcare. I was a kinesiologist, and I was always intrigued by how you could make a process better, so the continuous improvement piece. So as you know, when you can improve something, you change something. And so with figuring out, once we make it better, how do we actually implement it and get people to come along with it and actually use that new process or document that you've rolled out. So that's really where my change passion started. And as I started to work through my career, I went to school, I got my MBA, and that's where I started to learn a little bit more of the actual field of change management itself, which led me into my current role where I focus strictly on change management across the organization. And it's really trying to see how we can help people adopt the changes that we're implementing, because you can have the best solution in the world, but if you can't get people to use it and use it properly, you're not going to get the same outcomes and the business outcomes that you want.
Sorry, I was saying I agree with it's not easy, right? Oftentimes we're talking here about that you were saying that there's a challenge with change on how it usually happens, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is the type of problem that you often encounter in your role?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time, and what's most relevant right now, and you alluded to this at the beginning, is that we're experiencing such a high rate and volume of change. And when people are hit with so many new things, it's a lot harder to process and actually start implementing that change effectively. So it's that change fatigue that everyone's talking about. And you're not only getting it in your work, but you're getting it in your day to day life. Everything's been turned upside down. So the biggest challenge is figuring out how can we get people to still adopt these changes because there's really no way around it. So how do we make it more appropriate and um, easier for people to adopt and start using in their roles.
Yeah, and change is tough, right? As it is, and of course, it has been a constant over the past year. What is your advice on where to begin when change is happening?
Oh, that's a good question. It really depends on the type of change that you're doing. One problem that we've really realized is that in our organization, a lot of the time that we'll have a change that's being implemented, but we forget to look around at what else is happening within the company, what other changes are hitting people, and also making sure that the change is delivered in a way that's appropriate for the people that we're implementing it for. So one place that I really like to start is just getting a pulse check of how things are for people and what's going on in their lives. And it kind of goes back to the whole title of bringing people along with the change. So how can we start listening to what the actual experiences are of employees and building our change and our implementation around that?
And what mechanisms do you use typically to depart from listening to employees or to leaders, right? In your case.
Yeah, one thing that we've started to use in the last couple months is well, it's been something that's been ongoing, but we're really trying to ramp it up now, is called our change squad. And this is probably, you can use it in a lot of different ways. You've probably heard like change champions or whatever it might be, but it's individuals who you almost use as a pulse check across the organization. And we created groups that will focus on a specific project. And we also have one that helps us for broader organization changes, and it recruited people across the organization from different departments, different levels across the organization. And we have a Teams channel where we send them updates on what's happening, what our plans are for implementing a new project that's coming down the line and getting their feedback. So it's nice because not only does it help identify risks that are going on in different areas of the business, so you can imagine that someone who is working frontline has a very different experience than someone who's working in the corporate office. So having those individuals let us know what the thoughts and the feelings are in their group helps us identify the risks and provide a better strategy for implementing. And then the second piece is we get feedback from them as well on the actual material that's being released. So they can talk about, oh no, these instructions were missing this piece, or this doesn't make sense. We need to clarify and add examples. So it helps us develop better tools and communications for when we do roll out.
So it is like building your own army
Yeah,
within the organization
yeah,
that
exactly.
that builds empathy, basically, right? With them. So how do you identify these individuals? Like how do you get them on board, or where do
Yeah,
you
we
start?
so initially we started our larger change squad by targeting key groups within the organization that we wanted to partner with. So making sure our project management office, our communications team, our people resource managers, getting them all on board. So they actually began by doing the training, and then we continued that into our change squad. But more recently, we've been trying to leverage more virtual channels. So we know the leaders across the organization have a central Teams channel. So we'd send out a request. We call it our call for change agents, and um, ask leaders to either volunteer for themselves or if they know someone on their team that would be interested. I know the last project that we we did a call for these change agents, and we expected maybe to get 2 or 3 people because you keep hearing that people are so busy and they're just trying to get through the day. And we had 40 people actually respond
Wow.
and apply to this, so it was kind of a great surprise to get everyone on board. Once we did get our volunteers, we do like to do a quick look on the list and making sure that it's actually truly representative of the organization. And if there are areas that might be lacking representation, we'll reach out to some leaders we know in the area or the HR team to reach out and recommend some people to make sure that it's including everyone.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. I was going to say, how do you ensure the representation is so important? Just like when we do any kind of research, right? Or, but listening to the voice of employees can be something quite sensitive, right? It requires special listening techniques there too, right? And in many cases, when you're talking about this representation, we often find that, like you were saying, there are 40 people raising their hand, and it might be special circumstances, perhaps. But do you find that it's typically going to be those who are naturally more inclined to, more extrovert and inclined to share their opinion, or do you find that it's a balance of those who keep their opinions to themselves, or in this case, right, more of the introvert group?
Yeah, and a lot of the time we also worry if those are like the individuals putting their names forward and volunteering are actually the more engaged individuals across the organization. So that does make it harder to get an accurate representation. You usually do find that those individuals are more engaged. We are trying to leverage different channels so we can make people feel more comfortable. It's not like every session you would give feedback directly to me. We've included surveys or just sending out questions so people can respond via Teams instead of having to directly give their feedback to a person. Another way that we've been trying to get around that or address that concern is to do pulse checks. So if you do have your one change agent who's really engaged and more vocal, encouraging them to go and talk to 3 colleagues, for example, in their department and get some feedback there so it's more representative of what's actually going on.
But this is great. And how do you, once you have gathered this information, right, what is the next step in terms of analyzing what actions need to be taken?
Yeah, so a lot of the time we'll follow up with surveys or like asking the questions, and from there we'll take that feedback back to the team and work through the concerns that they have. A lot of the time from change management, we try to look at it as what risk would that pose to people actually accepting the change and figuring out what type of mitigation strategy we need to implement. So from what they've recommended, do we need to provide more training material? Do we need to provide an opportunity for question and answer? So looking at the different channels. And once we do have solutions on how we want to address those concerns, we'll bring it back to the change team and see how that resonates. And so we'll even get down to like, here's the communication we're going to send out. What are your thoughts on this? Does this what messages come out of that? And making sure that we're hitting the mark. And then, I lost my train of thought here. And then the other piece
We're
that we've
talking
also
about the analysis. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one really important part is to always make sure that we do a full circle. So even if people don't always have their feedback incorporated, we still want to acknowledge that we heard you and this was valuable feedback. This is why we weren't able to use it the exact way you wanted it to be, but we've tried to do this instead, just to make sure we keep that engagement going.
This is so important. It sounds to me, coming from the customer survey world, from the customer experience side of world, that is no different, that everybody wants to be heard and be seen, right? As a customer or an employee, and thinking about that human-centric design in what you do, right? In this, and especially in driving change. Can you share with us a bit of a story of a challenge that you encounter and how you went about to address it, and what was the result of it too?
Yeah. So a while back, we were implementing a new internal site for I guess all employees. And before we launched, we wanted to have we had a group of testers, so we had like a mini change agent group that came in, and these individuals were able to go and do the testing for us in advance and pick out all of the issues that were going on with the site that we hadn't seen or noticed in the past. Um, Another piece that was really helpful for that they helped us solve is we were trying to figure out the best way to actually communicate that this new site was being implemented and what the features were. So as they went through the testing, we also had that was more looking at the technical component side. And then the other piece that we added onto the survey was the actual user experience piece. So asking them, again, what were your key takeaways from here? Knowing or looking at the site and knowing what you do now, what do you think would be helpful for the rest of the company as we roll this out? And what would you recommend for training? And so that led us to develop videos. It was also really helpful because we were having issues with certain frontline um, users actually adopting this. And when these testers came on and started using the platform, we realized that they access it through tablets, and that the same process that they go through to access, or the process they go through is completely different than it looks like in a desktop. It doesn't have the same drop down menus. So people who haven't used that site are having difficulties navigating it. So we were able to build special training material for that group as well.
Well, that sounds fantastic, right? It's just that really, it sounds to me like a lot similar to the user experience roles, right? Where it's that
Yeah,
iterative process, right, of design and
definitely.
testing. Is that
Yeah.
what you're doing with your squads there as well and your
Yeah.
tester groups?
Yeah, moving more to that agile method where you try it, you test it out with the group, and then you modify. Yeah,
But that is great. So, and how has it been in regards to the organization or the leadership? Perhaps, right? It's really a key component in any change management strategy. So,
yeah,
what is your advice in regards to getting that alignment, right, with leadership and the implementation of change? What strategies
yeah,
do you?
yeah. For leaders, that's been an area we've been focusing on, I'd say, in the last couple months, and really realizing that the leaders, we need them on board first before we can actually get the rest of the employees on board, because they look up to their leaders for that support. So we're trying to get that change to come from the top down and from the bottom up by using the change squad. So with the leaders, we've been developing special training and key messages that will prepare and share with the leaders in advance. So they'll receive information a couple days before we actually implement fully or communicate broadly to the organization to make sure that they're actually prepared. We've started doing leader webinars. So we have a leadership development team, and we'll have a couple, the change team will suggest topics in relation to our projects, and we'll make sure that they can actually have access to this material. If there's training that we can do live demos. And the nice thing about those webinars is they actually have a Q&A submission piece, so they can submit their questions and we can provide answers at the end to make sure that they're fully prepared before these changes go out. Yeah.
So that
Um,
sounds like a comprehensive process there.
yeah, we try
Yeah.
to hit them from as many. I think there's all those things that you just have to keep. How many times, I can't remember it is, that you need to hear the same message before it actually sinks in. So it's like, okay, we got the webinars, we've done a communication, we know that the leaders use their leader website. So reinforcing through all those different channels to make sure that we hit everyone.
That is great. So you're wearing many hats. You're, in not only change management, it sounds like you're also doing marketing roles there in internal communication, right? And UX and the many say. So
Oh, we have a lot of support from those teams. Yeah, they've been really instrumental in actually making sure that we can roll these things out successfully.
great. And speaking about success, right? How do you measure the success of your implementation in
Yeah,
all of this process that you have described?
This is, I think, the most challenging part for me is so from change management, we try to look at what is the desired or the future state that you want. And you work with your stakeholders to build out what that looks like and what success would look like. So, for example, if you want to improve communication is something that we'll always hear. You want employees to adopt it. So, what would metrics can you tie to that to actually show what is good communication? Does it mean more emails are spent, more one-on-one time with employees is spent? So we try to drill down to actually identify what those metrics are before we actually implement the project. Um, and then also setting those targets, because a lot of the time when we do implement something new, you often do see a decline in productivity because people are learning and it takes time for people to learn and become proficient at the new solution. So making sure that people are prepared for a dip in performance and then also knowing where we want to end up. So if we do need to start mitigating or supporting in more areas to help achieve that, we can be there and know that that's happening.
This is great that you're what you're sharing also, because knowing where you're starting from and where you're going, right, is part of any initiative, right, in
Yes.
measuring success. And like you, I love the how sincere you are about, it's a challenge, right? Many times it's not comfortable in there. What would be your advice for those who are listening, and kind of like where to start looking on how to benchmark your initiative? What
I think for me, I think the hardest part is really getting a clear definition of what your future state looks like and um, trying to identify in a lot of detail what those components are. So looking at the people side, what processes would be affected by it. And even just to start, just getting your metrics in that tie to those. And going from there, even if it's just one metric, at least it's a start that you can keep building on.
Okay, so this is great. I'm seeing some of the comments here, and we have a few minutes here. So for those who are listening, if you have questions, comments, now is your time. We want this to be a roundtable discussion, or pretend we're in a coffee, at a coffee shop, right? Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
So please ask your questions in the next few minutes we have. I've had some people send me some questions ahead of time as well, and one of the questions that comes out quite often when it comes to employee experience is related to how do you help employees cope with employee fatigue, for example, which I know has been something really relevant. We're all experiencing like Zoom fatigue, or
Yeah.
or just the uncertainty fatigue, and things as such. What's your advice for this area?
Yeah, from the change perspective, we try to look at something what we call converging changes. So identifying what are all the changes that are hitting a different stakeholder group. And a lot of the time, what people don't realize is that one change in one department actually can expand and extend across the whole organization. So as a change professional, we try to look and get a sense of what's going on within the organization and what changes are hitting a certain group at the same time. From that, we'll try to either talk about, like, can we delay a certain change so people have time to process better, or are there certain changes that we can actually package together and include in one message so it's not the rapid fire of change, but instead one cohesive message.
So it sounds like going like in different pockets, right? Or implementing change in pockets is part of that strategy and implementation.
Yeah, or and also trying to align, because sometimes you can't help a change from happening and it's just the way it is. So knowing, if at least we have these three changes hitting this employee group, can we package the change and, combine our key messages so it seems as more of a packaged project instead of just a whole bunch of separate individual initiatives.
Wonderful. I'm going to share here. We have a comment here: intersectional and holistic systems. Thinking sounds like it is critical, right? So
Yes,
thinking
that
about the
nails it.
pockets and then that big vision. Thank you for sharing that. And so this is wonderful. What what final tips would you like to share with our audience as well, who are likely going through change management and on how to better bring people along with the change?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one easy tip if for starting off with change management is to start identifying why people might not want to accept a change. And so we call those our risks. So what are the reasons people might be hesitant to move forward? And that even just getting a sense of what those risks are can help you develop a more cohesive plan for your employees. And then the second piece is if you can start to get a change agent and start bringing people along for that change, you can always start small and just get a couple of people. And over time, that will pick up and you'll start to be able to grow that into something larger.
I love that. I love that. That's really very much aligned with the theme of this week, where it's like start somewhere, right? It's rather than getting it all right at once, right? And
Yeah.
starting in little pockets and such. But definitely, Natalie, you have a wealth of experience and knowledge, and of course, passion for this topic. So I can't thank you enough for your participation in sharing this with the 4 Experience Roundtable. And also with our audience here. We're streaming live today from Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and also follow us in our podcast at the 4 Experience Roundtable. And so thank you very much, Natalie, once again, for your time. For those who want to learn more about the 4 Experience Roundtable and have access to other exclusive events where you can actually interact with other peers like Natalie and actually exchange ideas and best practices and frameworks that can support your goals as well, go to 4experience.com/roundtable. And with that, thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to be live with Hydro-Quebec, and they are the winner of the overall Customer Centricity Award in North America in 2020. And both Martine Chartrand and Jonathan Beaulieu will be here live as well at the same time tomorrow, and sharing how by working with employees and changing behaviors internally, you can actually improve also the customer experience by giving them the empowerment to do so. So I can't wait for our next session. And once again, thank you very much, Natalie, for our session today.
Thanks for having me.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.